I'm here with Bob Stokes. He is the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor at the Attorney General's Office. Could you tell us a little bit about this training?
Well, the training we're doing today is focusing on drugged driving. The impaired drivers that we're seeing, are in the history have generally been the DUI related to alcohol. But in the recent past, what we've seen is a increase in impaired driving as it relates to those that are under the influence of drugs, whether it be prescription drugs or illicit drugs.
And the Attorney General's Office is sponsoring this, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor, and one of the things is my job is to provide training not only to prosecutors but also law enforcement officers, so that in essence the law enforcement and the prosecutors' offices can be on the same page when they focus in on these type of cases.
Yes, that's very important. Could you explain kind of why it's so important for the police and the prosecutors to be on the same page about these types of things?
Well, DUI cases in general, whether it be alcohol or drugs, are very complicated, and the investigation techniques that are utilized are training specific for the law enforcement officers, and then typically the prosecutors that deal with these cases may not always be privy of the type of information that the law enforcement officers are doing or utilizing in order to get the charges in place. So by having the prosecutors and law enforcement officers work together, they end up being on the same page, and so there's no surprises when these cases come forward and actually end up in the courtroom.
Well, thank you so much, and we sure do appreciate you sponsoring this training.
Well, thank you.
Dr. Davis, could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. I'm a state medical examiner. I'm also director of the Forensic Consultation Service for the University of Kentucky, and in that latter capacity, I spend a lot of time working with Commonwealth's attorneys, county attorneys, and defense attorneys, educating them about drunk driving, drugged driving, and also being available to testify when needed.
So do you serve as an expert witness for the Commonwealth of Kentucky a lot?
I do. An expert witness is just a person who has more training, education experience than the average person in the street, and because of my background in psychiatry and taking care of people who are drug and alcohol addicted, and in forensic pathology, which is looking at anything that can cause injury or death to a human being, I'm in a position to be able to help Commonwealth's attorneys' offices, county attorneys, and others.
That's great. Could you tell us a little bit about drug driving and the difference between that and the more popular drunk driving that we hear about?
Sure. Most people, when they hear DUI, they think driving under the influence, which is what that acronym stands for, and they think alcohol. And in many parts of the state, that is still the primary problem with impaired driving. But a phenomenon we're seeing in central and eastern Kentucky and in western Kentucky now is something called drugged driving, where the driver is impaired, they can't operate a motor vehicle safely, and yet it turns out they have no alcohol in their system. Perhaps they have narcotic painkillers, perhaps they have a benzodiazepine like a Xanax or Valium, an anti-anxiety drug that can also cause impairment. And the thing folks have to remember too is even over-the-counter drugs can cause impairment. One of the classic examples is diphenhydramine. You see it in the grocery store as Benadryl, and that was a drug back when I was an intern. I used to prescribe to people to put them to sleep.
Well, that's very interesting. I think that most of us wouldn't think that Benadryl could be so dangerous, especially for an impaired driver. What is the most popular, would you say, drug that you catch with drug driving?
It probably differs depending on what part of the state you're in. Here in Lexington and surrounding counties in the Bluegrass area, it's really sort of a 50-50 mix of either alcohol or a narcotic mixed with a benzodiazepine. So something like a pain pill mixed with an anti-anxiety drug. If you go to western Kentucky, a lot of times they see more things like bath salts, if you've heard of that. They are not bath salts. It's a synthetic form of amphetamine, essentially, and it can cause all sorts of psychotic reactions and an inability to drive. In far eastern Kentucky, we're seeing very little alcohol and mostly prescription drugs that people are abusing, even if they get it for themselves or if they buy it from somebody on the street. So it's really an ever-changing thing, and that's one of the problems these folks with the Attorney General's office and the Commonwealth attorneys, county attorneys, and law enforcement agencies have, is trying to keep one step above whatever substance it is that's hurting people's ability to drive.
So what kind of signals would the police look for as far as a drug driver compared to that of a drunk driver?
A lot of times they're the same. I mean, the kind of things that officers and I'm not an officer, but the kind of things that they look for is the person speeding? Are they going way too fast? Are they going way too slow? Are they weaving in and out of their lane? It's something technically called lane drift. Are they following somebody too closely? You know, you're going 70 miles an hour on I-64 and the guy is 2 inches behind your bumper. It could be that they're just a jerk and don't know how to drive, but it could be also that they don't realize that they're following you at an unsafe distance. So all of those things are on the radar of an officer when he or she is out there on patrol, because they know that unfortunately drugged driving is very, very common. And it actually frightens me a little bit how many of them are out there.
I'm here with Jessamine County's County Attorney, Brian Gettle. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're learning at this training?
We're learning a lot about just the types of drugs that are out there right now that people are using that are causing impaired driving. So it gives us a big heads up in terms of how we're dealing with that information once it comes in from our officers and also from the lab about what drugs are in the system. It's going to give us knowledge about what those drugs are doing to the impaired driver.
Okay, and the county attorney's office deals with misdemeanor crimes. Is this a commonly misdemeanor charged crime?
We're seeing a lot more drug driving that is occurring in Jessamine County, and I think it's a statewide problem, whereas before we were prosecuting a lot of alcohol-related impaired driving. Now we're seeing much more drug driving, so it's a bigger issue for us to handle.
Okay, and in the Jessamine County area, is there a particular type of drug that you all see more commonly than others?
I think our biggest issue right now is oxycodone and methamphetamines that are present.
Wow, that seems like it would be very dangerous behind the wheel.
It is, and we're seeing with those types of impairments a lot more accidents as opposed to an alcohol-related. You're seeing the swerving on the roadway and so forth, but with the drug driving, we're seeing a lot more injury accidents, property damage.
Wow, well, thank you so much. This is Lexington Prosecutor News Online. Thanks for watching.